Right, so let's crack on. I've already mentioned that this is a beetle that you'll find in woodland rides. Sometimes people find it in their gardens, but mainly because they've moved like wood and stuff. So maybe they've got like a log store outside, and these guys all come out and then they kind of sit and they bask. They have no shame, and this is the wasp beetle. This is the only time I'm going to mention it today, just because it's not something that really we traditionally would find when we're out in green spaces. So. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to be looking at commonly found groups. And when I say commonly found, I mean things that people will find in their garden every day. Things you will find in the school ground when you open a log, like flip over a log or flip over a rock. I have actually tried to concentrate on things that people always seem to gloss over. And the reason for that, I think, is because there is so much beauty and just amazing stories that a lot of these can tell. And what I really want people to be able to do is when you're talking to groups of people or when you're just talking to your peers and just trying to really enthuse people, have a few facts there. Like you'll see like everyone's like, oh yeah, I want you to talk about butterflies. I'm not going to talk about butterflies. I'm not even going to talk about spiders. I'm going to talk about all the weird stuff that people don't bother with. And in some cases, I will give you some really distinctive species and sort of starting points, and then I'll show you some literature that I'd recommend for those that are beginning with this journey. I'll be looking at some of the key features. I'll point those out. I will mention some of the life histories and some of the cool behavior that some of these do. And as I've already mentioned, I'm going to show you some resources. And when I say resources, I'm not talking about really technical keys or all this literature to go on to next steps. I'll give you some organization names that will have some really nice resources on their web pages. I will give you some literature and maybe even just some free websites as well. That's what I'm going for, and it's all aimed at beginners. So if you're an expert, you are welcome to stay for the thing. But I am very much focused on people that, what is this? Is this what I think it is? I'm not really sure. How do I pass on the info? Cool. Let's rock on. So, first thing I'm going to even begin with is hand lenses and magnifying glasses. So, I've got a hand lens here and I've got a magnifying glass here. And if you are talking to people or you're doing a bug hunt or something similar or bio blitzes, these are the things that you will see one of. What people don't always realize, and it's something I am I'm hellbent on trying to sort this, is people don't know how to use these properly. So they both magnify, they both make small things bigger, but they work in a very different way. So this is what you would have with kids, and it's got a big massive lens. I can how big my eye is there, that's fantastic. It's a big lens, which means it's kind of for sharing for more than one person. So when you're using one of these, really you want it quite close to where you're at. And if you want to move, to get a bit closer, that's fine. But these are very much designed to be close to the thing. There we are, close to the thing, and it's a bit better. This, on the other hand, needs to be close to your eye. So this has to be as close to your eye as you can. I used to take my specs off when I'm using these, but as close to your eye as you can, and then you move either your body or the thing into focus. And then if you look at the size of the lens, it kind of gives you the clue there. It's a small lens, so you need to be closer to it to see it. And this is a big lens, so you can be further away. By all means, you can move closer to it if you want, but they work in slightly different ways. And a lot of people pick these up and go, oh, it doesn't work. I can't see anything with it. And it's because they're not holding it properly. It needs to be close to your face. There we are. Close to eyes, far away from eyes. There we are. Let's go. All good. So I thought, how do I break up invertebrates? How do I make this accessible? And I thought, I'm going to go for taxonomic, really scientific language here. So I'm going to split them into wet stuff and crunchy stuff. That's where I'm going with this. So that's how I'm splitting stuff today. You can't tell me any different. That's how I'm doing it. So we'll start with the wet stuff. So we've got the long ones. So these are the segmented worms or the annelids. We've got the slimy with shells, snails, which are in the group mollusks. And we've got the pure, unadulterated slime, which are the slugs. Again, they're mollusks, so slugs and snails are very closely related. And then, yeah, let's crack on. So we've got a lovely worm here, and everyone picks up a worm and goes, "Oh yeah, this is an earthworm, and they're really good for the soil." And everyone kind of glazes over at that point. And worms are awesome. There's like quite a few species in the UK, um, But what does a worm and a horse have in common? Well, they both have a saddle. Okay, so this is the first part. And not all worms have a saddle. And the reason for that is that only adult worms who are ready to reproduce have a saddle. So already you've got a bit of a story you can tell here. Oh, this is an adult. You don't get male and female worms. They're both hermaphrodites. They just kind of join together and just have great time. And that's how they make babies. But all the reproductive stuff is in that saddle. And actually, if you're looking at identification, I'm not going to go into species for earthworms because it involves a lot of counting and I'm quite lazy. But the saddle and where the saddle is and how many little bits of segments are one side of the saddle and how close a hole is in part of the saddle is actually really important for species identification. So you've got a saddle, that's great. I've already said they're male and female. They can be whatever they want, depending what they want. They just put a nice hat on and get on with the day. Everyone will talk about how earthworms are good for the soil. They're good for cycling nutrients. They pull down the things like leaves and stuff, and they put it into the ground, and they move nutrients from the top of the surface of the ground underneath where it decomposes and cool stuff happens. What people often don't realize as well, they kind of stop at that point, but actually they also aerate soil and reduce waterlogging because they're making burrows underneath. They're punching holes into this solid mass of decomposedness and really making it quite healthy. So it's not just the cycling of nutrients and pulling stuff from the top to the bottom. They are putting holes in it, which gives airflow, which means that you get different kinds of organisms, just higher levels of biodiversity as well. And then you reduce waterlogging as well because you've got holes, so there's free drainage. So earthworms are fantastic and they are great for soils, but there is more to it than just they move nutrients around and make it healthy. Like there we are. They also have five pairs of what we call pseudo hearts, so fake hearts. So there's a lot of love in an earthworm. Five pairs of hearts, I think, is a great fact anyway, and it's not something that I hear often when I'm out on a ramble with people. Um, and they also make these. So they make a cocoon. So you'll sometimes see these, which are fantastic. They look like little lemons. They're quite small, but bigger than you would expect them to be. Probably like a couple of mil, maybe a little bit bigger, but they look like little lemons. So they put like I think it's between about 10 and 20, it will depend on the species, little eggs inside each cocoon. They make these cocoons and then they just leave them about and then they sort of emerge, all these baby worms come out and gradually get bigger over time. So when life gives you lemons, make more earthworms. So hopefully earthworms aren't just a oh it's a worm now. You've got a bit more ammo to go with and actually something to move on. Do you want to ID these further? If you do, there's the Earthworm Society, which have all kinds of amazing things. And there's also a earthworm identification key, but you'll probably need a microscope to do that properly. But yeah, if worms are cool, they're cooler than people say they are. Right, let's go snails. Zara, I can't tell you off the top of my head. I think it's between about 20 and 30, but I will find out in a minute. Okay, snails, slimy with shells. So we've got garden snails. These are the ones that we always come across. What I love about garden snails, see if I can get is you get these battle-hardened ones. And this change in what the shell looks like here is in response to some damage where it's repaired or something's changed, maybe an environmental pressure. It might be that they're not getting as much calcium, so it might change what it looks like. But if you see these battle hardened ones, these have got a story, and it's a nice thing to point out. Oh, I can see that this has actually had some damage in the past, and and you can make a bit of a story about that, which is cool. This is your garden snail. They're the most common across the UK. They are the ones that appear as soon as it rains. They're big, massive ones, and they are lovely. They will break down organic matter, so they'll eat plants and they'll eat dead things as well. So they even eat like they find a dead mouse, they'll have a go on that. If you leave your cat food out, you might get them covered in slugs and snails. And they eat and they've actually got 20,000 teeth on their tongue. So it's like a giant piece of sandpaper that they have that they'll rasp. And if you've got a piece of glass with loads of algae on it or something similar, sometimes you get these weird squiggly patterns. And it's actually where these guys have gone on and just grazed the algae off the top, gradually cleaning your window for you. They have one foot for traveling. With snails, especially the larger ones that have bigger shells, their trail is actually more spotted. So it's not a continuous trail of slime. It's like a trail of spots. And only snails do that. And the reason for that is because the shell is like a bit of extra weight and it causes them to like inchworm across, which causes this characteristic spotting pattern when you see it. So when you see a spot, you're, oh, a snail's been here. And you can impress all your friends because you're not saying, oh, it's a slug or a snail. You know it's a snail because they're the only ones to do the spotting. Both can do the continuous trail, especially the smaller ones. But yeah, it's a cool fact to impress all of your friends. So we've done the garden snail. We also have this. So this is the brown lip snail. So this comes in different color forms, and but it's like if it's stripy and it's got a brown lip on the edge, there it is. There's a little brown lip. You know it's a brown lip snail. You've got an ID there. That's cool. Bosh. You can impress all your friends. Sometimes they don't have the stripes, and there can be other things they might look like. But if they are stripy and they have that brown lip, great. But if you find one without a brown lip, then it's the white lip snail. Again, stripy, and they do have different color forms, but if it's stripy and it's got a white lip, you've got a white lip snail. Done. Three species of snail off the back like that. If you are in woodlands, you might come across this guy. This is a lot smaller, 6 to 8 mil, quite glossy, and it has the flesh, the body is like a grayish blue. Can look quite blue in some pictures when you see pictures online and stuff like that. It'll also have a shell that has a hole underneath. So this isn't the only species that has this, but it kind of has this like gap, and you don't get that in the larger snails like the garden snail and things like that. And you're like, okay. And then you want to sniff it. Okay. You want to sniff this dude. If it smells like garlic, then you've got a garlic snail. So you've got three IDs there. Bosh. So you can go around and you can tell all the people you hang around with, all the kids you've got, whoever is around you, you can go, can you go and look for a small snail in this woodland? Usually like edges of woodland, like yeah, I find them on rides quite a bit under like wet, not wet, moist logs. And you can just tell the kids to go sniff for snails. And they're like, what? And you're like, yeah, see if you can find one that smells like garlic. And when they find them, it is like the best thing ever. And people don't believe how much of like garlic they smell like. It's incredible. Don't know why they smell of garlic, but yeah. And then we go to the slugs. Again, a massively overlooked group. And I don't know why. Originally, I probably would have went, yeah, well, I don't know how to ID them. There's not many ID guides. There is an ID guide. It's one of our FSC ones, and it uses like a range of different features, and there are a few online resources as well. Um, but this is the green cellar slug. So this is probably the most distinctive, and there was a recording scheme specifically for this by Imogen, who championed slugs and really sort of showed me how awesome slugs are. But you can see with this dude, so you've got this kind of section here, the top bit of a slug, and it usually has like a fingerprint pattern on it, and the fingerprint pattern can help with ID. But this is called the mantle, and there are certain parts on the mantle that can be used for ID, again, fingerprint patterns, and they have a breathing hole, and their breathing hole isn't always open. I'm pretty sure it's always on one side. I think it's the right hand side, and it will be shut, and then every so often it will just open. It'll be this massive hole, and you're like, oh, and then it just sucks in all this air and then just closes it again. And yeah, that's just how they breathe. That's what they do. The cellar slug is this kind of greenish grey color with these like yellow spotting. Sometimes people confuse it with the leopard slug because that's equally as spotty, but it's way more spotty, and sometimes it's stripy at the bottom. It's got like stripy pajamas with like a spotted mantle. What I love about both these slugs is it kind of tips what people think about slugs on its head. It's like, oh yeah, they come and eat everything in my garden. They're gonna destroy everything. Not all slugs do that. Green cellar slugs feed almost specifically on decomposing things. So they like basically rotting stuff. They're the ones that live in your compost heap. So if you lift if you've got a compost heap, one of those like plastic ones with the lid, you'll find loads of these in there because they absolutely love it. And they are really important for sort of breaking down these foods, these rotting foods, into something that can be used by plants in your compost, and throughout the garden and throughout ecosystems and landscapes. Your leopard slug is a predator. So he will actually go around and eat all the other slugs that are causing issues in your garden. So it really bugs me. Like, oh yeah, I put that slug pellets. It's like, well, you might have got rid of the predator that might have been keeping things in line and would have got a bit better. So these two flip that on their head straight off the bat because you've got a predatory slug and a slug that only eats decomposing plant matter. It doesn't eat the fresh stuff. Um, and I think that's important when people are talking about groups of invertebrates. Like they're all different. Like, yeah, they might look the same, but they all have their own different life histories. They all have their own different habits and preferences and things. So yeah, slugs are cool. I like a slug. The other great thing is that some slugs can be identified in part by the color of their slime. So this is the milky slug. You'll find this. I mean, he looks a bit like a manky old toenail here, but they have this like netted pattern, but they're very white and very milky. We do have a ghost slug in the UK, which is quite pale as well, but it's less commonly found. You will find this in your gardens. You will find this in the park. You will find this near enough everywhere in the UK. This guy, you give him a little bit of a rub like that and rub him between his fingers, and he just has this milky white slime. It's gross, but it's really cool, and it's one of its identification features. There's another group of slugs as well. I think it's the Arons, they have some of them have an orange slime. So what you can actually do, if you don't want to get it on your fingers, which is absolutely fine, you can just sort of rub them really gently on a piece of white paper and see. So even if you can't ID a slug two species, it's a really fun and engaging way to get people talking about them. The other great thing, I couldn't find a video, which is really frustrating. You know the massive red and black slugs you get? They're a bit of a nuisance in your garden, I'm not gonna lie. They're the massive ones. My mum used to call the grandfather slugs because they were just like so absolutely huge. When you touch them, they pull themselves almost into a ball, and then they wriggle really slowly like this. And it's how they produce slime. I think it's a bit of like a predator avoidance mechanism. They wriggle, and all these like lumpy bits at the back, you can see them kind of shift. So if you haven't seen a slug dance, try and find one of the really big, they're like orangey red and black ones that sometimes have like a red frill around them as well, around their base. They're the ones that dance, so that you want to find those. So when people go, oh, I found a big slug, that's you go, oh, let's see if we can get it to dance. And that'll be one of the Arons. So either the red or the black slug. Really annoyingly, they're really like the color doesn't distinguish the species, and they're really closely related. It's a bit of a complex species thing. But just call them either a red or a black slug, and you're on the money basically. Okay, we've done the slimy stuff, we've done the wriggly stuff, we've done the wet stuff. Let's go crunchy. So pull these into three groups. I've got the ones with all the legs, so your centipedes and millipedes, these are your myriapods. And then you've got your land crabs, which are your woodlice, your isopods, they're crustaceans. That's why I call them land crabs. It makes them sound way more exciting. And then we've got the winged things, so insects. And some of you will go, but not all insects have wings. We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, myriapods. So hopefully I've got you all on. I think hopefully I've still got you on the hook and I'm not just rattling through this too fast, but we're 24 minutes in, so let's go. Myriapods. People, including my wife, get these mixed up. I don't know why she still gets them mixed up. She lives with an entomologist, but centipedes and millipedes are very closely related, but they are different. So centipedes, some people go, oh, they're flatter or they're rounder. That doesn't always work, and I'll show you why in a minute. But centipedes generally are a lot faster. They are flatter in most cases, but they are a lot faster. They are hunters. They are predatory. They chase things down, they wrap themselves around stuff, and they inject it with venom, and then they eat it. And then we've got basically the really chill vegetarian cousin. So these are your millipedes. They don't need to be fast. They're not going to chase a bit of mushroom around the garden. They're not going to go and chase a bit of decomposing log somewhere. Like they just take life as it comes. They are slow. They look like they move with a purpose. They're very like organized, but they don't rush. They're not in a rush. Why do you need to be? I love them. Centipedes, because they are predatory, they need some way to inject their venom. And life didn't give them these massive mandibles to inject venom. And what they actually decided was, do you know what? These front legs, I'm going to use these for something else. So they've actually evolved, like their front legs have evolved into these giant venom injecting things, and we call them forcipules. And some of the largest of the stone centipedes, which I'll show you in a second, have massive forcipules. They almost stick out the side of the underneath their head, and they're insane. They're just really cool. But they fully invested in the I'm going to hunt stuff down lifestyle. Millipedes tend to be more rounded, usually. Again, I'll talk about that in a second. Especially these train millipedes. This is actually a snake millipede, but yeah, um, they're quite rounded and cylindrical, and they kind of just move along like a solid snake, essentially. The main thing is how many legs they have on a segment. So on each of these segments on a millipede, you will have two legs or two pairs of legs, not two legs, two pairs of legs. On a centipede, you will have one. And what throws people is that actually on these little lines here are actually counted as a segment as well. So you've got one segment there, got a fat segment and a thin segment, but on each one, they've got one pair of legs. So that's which end of a centipede is which. Joe, the really easy way is one's got massive venom-filled legs at the front and one doesn't. So that's the easy way. And now you know. Okay, so stone centipedes are so you'll come across these. I'm trying to split these into groups so you don't just go, oh, it's a centipede. You can actually start to compartmentalize these. And actually, these actually fall into families. I haven't used all the family names, but they are loose categories that you can start to group stuff in. It also gives you a name. So you don't just sound like, oh, I'm just saying centipede. You're giving a direction. It sounds like you really know your stuff, and you do because you know more than most people. But what always happens is someone goes, "What's this? What's this?" And if you can say, "Well, this is a centipede and this is a centipede," but they're both very different looking things, if you can start to separate them, that's great. So your stone centipedes are the ones I was talking about that have these massive forciples that stick out on the side of their face. You can see that, and they sort of like close underneath their head. Um, they are quite stocky in comparison to some centipedes you'll find in the UK. They look a bit armored. They look like they're going to go for a fight and they're probably going to win. If you look at their eyes underneath a just the hand lens, they look a bit more menacing than the others. And they tend to be this sort of browny reddy color, and these are your stone centipedes. And then you have this snake centipede. So these are the ones that are really long and they look like a piece of rope. It's just been legs thrown on it. And they move in a very different way to some of the millipedes that might look superficially similar. They kind of, this head goes like this. They're like a snake. They do look like a snake. That's how they move. And the reason they're long and thin is because they live in the ground. So stone centipedes tend to run on the surface, but are found under stones, hence their name. Snake centipedes like to get in and about in between all the detritus and substrate and mud and leaves and Lord knows what. And being long and thin is really advantageous to that. There's a reason a worm looks like a worm, and there's a reason a snake centipede looks like a snake centipede. You can get into those nooks and crannies a lot easier and find the things you're looking for. So there's your stone centipedes and your snake centipedes. You split them beautifully. Now we've got your millipedes. So these are your flatback millipedes. They look a bit like a caterpillar track off of a, yeah, like a digger or something. I love them. They're probably my favorites. They have a flat back. That's why they're called flatback millipedes. A lot flatter than traditional millipedes that you might see out and about. I love them. They're my favorite by far, and they always confuse people because they don't really look like what people expect them to. They move with a purpose, but they take life slow like their cousins. These are the ones that people typically think of when they think of millipedes. These are snake millipedes. They are cylindrical. They roll in a ball quite nicely. They, yeah, it's a snake millipede. They're long and thin compared to some of the others. And then we've got the pill millipede. So a lot of you might go, wait a minute, that's a woodlouse. It's not. One of the defining features of a woodlouse is it's got seven pairs of legs, and pill millipedes have a lot more. They tend to be a bit more like cylindrical, but I don't know. They do look different, but I think the easiest way is to flip them over, look at their legs. If they've got two pairs per segment, then you're looking at a millipede, and it's going to be a little bit more than you would find on a woodlouse. So there are your three main groups. There are a few others for both of these groups. But if you can remember those five, you are on a good stead to carry on. And they do marry up with families and stuff. I think the snake centipedes actually cover a couple of groups of the centipedes. But there we are. And then we've got the land crabs. So I absolutely love these. They're so cool, and I think they're so overlooked. They just, when you get like an image like this, you can see how cool they are. Like, but the fact that they are crustaceans that have decided, you know what, I'm going to try land. I'm going to do this. They still have gills underneath, so they need to be moist to breathe. If they're not moist, then they can't breathe. So you always find them in moist areas, under logs, under stones. You know, we find them all the time. What astounds me is that I think woodlice are probably the most commonly found invertebrate when you look for bugs, but no one seems to know much about them, which is a bit strange. What I would recommend is there's the BMIG group, so it's the British Myriapod and Isopod group that do centipedes, millipedes, and woodlice, and they've got a few like, oh, these are the easy species to remember, and I'd recommend having a look at those. I'll throw a link in the follow-up email, and I mention them a bit later as well. So woodlice are your decomposers. They will break things down, rotting wood, that kind of thing, and they'll turn a big lump of something into something that can be used by other organisms. They're really, really important. They are nature's cleaning crew. And you'll find exotic versions of woodlice be used in stuff like terrariums to keep mold and things down and clean up after animals that might be kept. So there was a bit of a push probably about a decade ago where people went, oh, I can just do this and they'll do the cleaning for me within reason. And so now there's loads of really cool tropical woodlife species that you can get for pets, which is just really cool. And some of them are made, some of them look like little rubber ducks, which are really cool. As I've already said, woodlice have 7 pairs of legs, which differentiates them from the pill millipedes. There's about 30 UK species, there's quite a few. Some of them have a little pig nose, which is really cute. They have the rough woodlouse, which is very bumpy. This is the common shiny one, which is quite flat. But there are a few others. There's one that's associated with ants' nests. It's very small and very white. And if you lift up a log with ants' nest and you find a little white woodlouse there, it's an ant woodlouse, not a baby one, which is really cool. What I love about these, they have a two-stage molting process. So what they do is they do half of their body at once. So this is the second end of that process. So they will molt their back end first. They'll leave it a few days and then they'll do the front end. And what you can sometimes find is when you've got a group of woodlice, is they'll have one that's like darker on one end than the other, and it's because it's halfway through molting. So what they start quite light and then they darken up as they get as they're exoskeleton kind of like hardens basically. They also urinate with gas, so they don't secrete a liquid in the same way. They just release ammonia, which can give them a bit of a smell if you give them a sniff. But I haven't particularly noticed it. I've seen it in some, but it's not something I traditionally notice. But that's how they release all of their like gross stuff, which is cool. The liquid version anyway. By far the best thing about woodlice is their regional names. They have probably the most names in the UK than any other living organism, which I think is fantastic. There are 250 regional names worldwide. There's a paper that talks about ones just in Devon. I think there's like 30 just in Devon alone. Here's a few examples. We've got tiddly pigs, curly pigs, woolly bugs, TikToks. Like they're just what? How isn't a woodlouse the spokesperson for TikTok? It should be like that's what they're called. Like why isn't it? It probably just has the most names. Like this is a fraction. This is what I could fit on. There are so many. In Scotland, you tend to find that most people call them slaters, but there are some weird ones as well. There's some in Ireland that are a bit strange as well. Quite a lot of these are pigs themed, and there's lots like I think you'll see like sow bugs there and chicky pigs and things. And some people hypothesize this might be because of the smell of the ammonia gas they give off. Some people think that actually when you lift them up and you see a big one with some little ones, it looks like a sow with their little piglets next to them, which is really endearingly cute when you think about it. Um, there's also the name pill bugs. So there is the pill bug, which rolls up like a pill, like a traditional Victorian pill where they used to be round and made on a roller. But also they were used in traditional medicine. So I've seen a few like folk remedies where it's like crush some of these up and add with some wine and it will cure your gout. And it's just like it's amazing. So yeah, I mean they are actually edible because yeah, they are essentially a crustacean. You can eat them. I wouldn't recommend it. But there are some old recipes I've seen for like cooking them and like frying them. So Yeah, I mean, it's not something I would traditionally advocate, but I have seen reference to it. So yeah, fun. I've just seen in the chat how many legs the centipedes have and how many the millipedes have. As Terry says, it depends on the species. Some have like hundreds, some have like between 20 and 50. It just depends on what you're looking at. Okay, winged things. Insects, by far the largest group of invertebrates, I think worldwide, actually. Like they're insane. Like they're just really, really cool. Arthropods anyway, not maybe not invertebrates, but definitely arthropods. They're large groups separated in the UK into 24 main groups. So when you talk about like butterflies and moths and beetles and stuff like that, they're all fleas, like these are all insects. They are all characterized by having three body parts, so the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. They will have three pairs of legs and they will have a pair of antennae. So that makes a insect, but also they all in the history of their life would have had two pairs of wings at some point. Now, a lot of these, I say a lot, most insects do have wings as the adult stage. So if you see an insect with wings, it will always be an adult. Unless you're talking about mayflies because they have this weird like sub-adult stage. But ultimately, if it's got wings, it's an adult and it's ready to reproduce. So if you see an insect without wings, it's one of two things. It's either a group where over time it's lost its wings, or with ants, for example, only the reproductive like queens and kings, I guess, the males, reproductive males, will have wings for flight, and all the workers don't retain those. So workers and soldiers don't have wings. But ultimately, most insects at their adult stage should have wings. When you look at flies, their back pair, their rear pair. So we've got a four wings and your hind wings here. In flies, this is modified into a peg-like structure called a halter, which helps them stabilize in the air. So they've only got two wings, which is one of their features. And in beetles, this front pair has been hardened over time. So, and it becomes a wing case essentially. So that's two of the main adaptations. You have things like fleas that would have are relatives of the snow fleas, which are relatives of scorpion flies, which have wings. So over time, they've just gradually lost them because you don't need wings if you're living inside a dog, right? So, okay, let's talk flies because no one talks about flies. They are probably one of the most speciose groups, like the most species in the UK. Wasps are probably up there. Beetles are 4,000, so way less. Like worldwide, there are more beetles, but in the UK there are more species of fly. So that is the number that I've pulled, which is the most recent one I can find, which is in a really good book, which I'll show you in a second. Um, but to see if it's a fly, see if it's got big eyes. You can actually sometimes tell males and females apart from the size of their eyes. If they touch at the top, they'll be a male, and if they don't, they're a female, but only in some groups. Hoverflies is a good example. One of the ways to differentiate them from bees, you can see I've picked a fly that really, really, yeah, Jazzy, that's 7,283 species in the UK. Like, it's wild. Um, I've picked a species of bee here that species of bee, a species of fly that looks like a bumblebee, and I've done that on purpose because it's the sort of thing that throws people out. Um, so if you look at the antenna, bees will always have long elbowed antenna. So this is a bumblebee here, and he's got a long elbowed antenna. It's got bend in it, and that's one of the features. The eyes are a bit different as well, but let's not split hairs at the moment. But it has no elbowed antenna is what you're looking for. If it has elbowed antenna, you might be looking at a bee or a wasp or an ant as well. But in this case, this is definitely a fly. Flies look like they're up to mischief. So when they land, if they're rubbing their hands like this, and they're hatching a plan, it's going to be a fly. Bees will groom. They'll groom their like antenna and they'll move their fluff around, but they don't rub their hands together like this. Like they're not, they don't do that. So that's a nice feature when they've landed, if you can work that out. The two wings I've mentioned, and then the shape is quite nice. So here you can see that there's one attachment point. So the wing is only attached at one point, and you've got this nice curve here, and it's a nice solid shape. And then if I move to the next slide, I've got a fly wing and a hymenopteron wing, so either a bee or a wasp. And then if we look at these, so this is actually two wings joined together. We've got two attachment points. And I'm going to be honest with you, this can be hard to see because if you look at a bumblebee, for example, they're really hairy. But two attachment points is one thing, but also the shape. Look at the shape. So this is a continuous curve essentially. Whereas when you've got here, you can see this slightly different shape. So sometimes you can pick that up quite nicely. With so this is a fly, and this is a hymenopteron wing, a bee or a wasp or an ant. And what they actually have is this cool little Velcro that sticks, little hooks that sticks onto the wing. So it kind of loops over the top of this vein on this wing, and it holds them together. And so it creates a lot more lift. Because it moves like this in the air, whereas flies do it in a slightly different way. Flies as well, in most cases, have a higher pitched sound to their rather than a there are exceptions to the rule, but it's a nice on the wing. Sometimes you can hear it. Cool. Ones to look out for flies. Ah, hoverflies are great. I love them. And if you're trying to get people excited about flies, this is a good group. There's loads of them, but there are some three very distinctive species, and they all have a range of diets. So the Batman hoverfly here so called because it has a Batman logo right here. So if you spot that, you know it's a Batman hoverfly. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na, Batman. Um, as a larva, it will live in like when you have stuff at the end of your garden that's full of water and it's all like a bit gross and a bit manky, it's got like, leaves in and stuff. They eat all that basically. And they have these really cool rat tails, so they can breathe out of the water because it was usually stagnant. So they do that, and then you've got some others here. So some species of hoverfly will have predatory larvae that will eat green flies and stuff as well. So they're a really varied group, and their larvae may eat completely different stuff to what the adults eat. So some hoverflies don't really feed at all. Some will. Some are parasitic, which is really fun. They go into like wasps' nests and stuff, and they're all pollinators. They all land on pollen and nectar and stuff. They need the energy, and so they're really good for your garden. So they may rely on multiple habitats and they are really good pollinators. So you've got your Batman hoverfly there with the Batman logo. You've got the marmalade hoverfly, and what you're looking for here is this is a very flat abdomen. Sometimes you see it wiggle up and down, but it's got these complete pale lines here. So in between its normal black and yellow, it's got these. I don't know why it's called a marmalade hoverfly. Maybe that's the layer of marmalade you've got in a cake. I don't really know, but these lines here and you've got two complete lines, you know it's a marmalade hoverfly. So you've got two species there straight off the bat of flies that people don't even notice half the time. And then you've got the footballer hoverfly, Heliophilus pendulus, if you want to be really fancy. And it's got this football kit on these stripes. So really big, bulky, lads, with a football kit on. That's your footballer hoverfly. So now you've got three species of fly. You don't know just the housefly. Cool. Um, what I would say, actually, no, I'll talk about it in a minute. That's fine. Um, I think this is the last group now, so parts of a beetle. So beetles are my jam. I love a beetle. This is all beetle books. Beetles are fantastic. I can't not talk about beetles. And it's one of those groups that people go, I like beetles, don't really know where to go with them. So as I've already mentioned, beetles have a hardened wing case. Most beetles can fly. Some have lost the ability over time, but their wing cases are what makes them beetles, essentially. It's big, crunchy, hard bits. Got a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. They'll have palps on the front of their face. They have this thing called a pronotum on the back, which is really important for ID. So if you're taking photos of beetles for people to ID or you to ID later, take ones from above because you can see all the proportions and the shapes and things. Really important. There's your elytra. So one side is the elytron, both together are the elytra. We can call them wing cases. It's fine. And then we've got a little triangle bit at the top, which is the scutellum. Ladybirds are beetles. They're not their own thing. Ladybirds are beetles. They're very distinctive beetles. They are a great entry point for identification of beetles. I actually did ladybirds very late. I did all the boring brown and black stuff first. And then I was like, I don't know my ladybirds. How did this happen? They are good for pest control, but not all of them eat aphids and stuff. Some of them eat mildew, some of them eat other weird stuff that they find out and about. This orange ladybird here on the end, which is luckily is called the orange ladybird, so it's very easy to ID. It's one of our biggest ladybirds in the UK. You will find that when you're knocking vegetation because it sits underneath the leaves and it eats the mildew and stuff like that. There are 46-ish species, and there are small ones and there are big ones. The big ones are the ones that you probably want to start with. And they are mega easy to learn. There are at least 10 that you can just do by pattern recognition, and then the rest kind of like fill in the gaps afterwards. So this is your 7 spot. If you've got a big red ladybird that has 3 spots on one side, 3 spots on the other, and 1 spot in the middle, it is going to be your 7 spot ladybird. Unless you find it in a wood ant's nest, which I don't think many people knock around in because it could be the really rare one. But 98% of ladybirds that look like this in the UK are going to be 7 spot ladybirds. Really easy. And that size is important because most of the other ladybirds are smaller than that. If you've got something that is the same size as this, um, if you got the same size as this, you are you might be looking at the Harlequin if it doesn't have that pattern recognition. There are a few that might catch you out, but whenever it's the Harlequin ladybird, size is a big indicative factor because there are 3 quite big ladybirds. One's the 7 spot, one's the orange spot, and one's the Harlequin. So getting your eye on those, which means all the little ladybirds tend to be something a bit more interesting. The next one is my favorite. This is the 14 spot. It has nice square spots and sometimes it makes a little smiley face, which is really nice. 14 spot, easy to remember. Don't count the spots, just know it's the 14 spot is my recommendation. And then we've got our orange. Other beetles you're going to encounter. So these are your raspberry beetles. There are actually 2 species, but you'll find them in buttercups. They're this brown and very, very hairy. They are raspberry beetles. Call them raspberry beetles. You sound really cool and you know all the things. They're 2 species, but don't tell anyone. Next one are your swollen thighed, big swollen thighed beetles. You'll find these on top of oxeye daisies at the moment. There's loads of them. They do go a bit coppery once they get a bit sunburnished, and the females don't have these big legs. But if you've got the males, they have this like gap in their wing cases, which is really cool. Big legs, you know it's that. The ones without the big legs, there are a few that can be very similar, but the males for those, swollen thigh beetle, done a species, done. And ones you will find in force in about 3 weeks' time is the red soldier beetle. Sometimes called the hogweed beetle, sometimes called the bonking beetle because they are prolific at making and copulating with one each other. This red color goes to orange with a black tip. Can't really be much else, to be honest. Yeah, that's the red soldier beetle. Done. This is the last group. So these are your true bugs. Again, very, very overlooked. This is really nice. This is the parent shield bug, and it has all the little babies underneath, and it actually looks after the eggs over the top, and then the babies hatch, and it kind of looks after them a little bit. So that's really cute. There are loads of them. Yeah, 1,700 UK species. They are split into aphids, shield bugs, leaf hoppers, pond skaters. There's some other aquatic ones as well. I don't go into those too much, but water boatmen are examples of bugs. They're in the same order. They are a mix of plant and insect feeders. They've got a long rostrum, so it's just like a beak that they stab into stuff, whether it's plant juices or whether it's animal juice, like bug juices, will depend on the species. To split the two from bugs and beetles, you want to look for an X on the back. In beetles, they've got a tiny little triangle here, and in bugs, it's a massive one. We call it the scutellum, massive triangle. That's what you're looking for. And the wings, they kind of have this like bit at the end. They're only half hardened, so you get this X shape. They always have long thin antenna, and they usually have 5 segments. Whereas if you compare it to a beetle, you have a T shape where the stuff tends to meet in the middle, and then you have way more antennal segments. All the antenna look completely different. True bugs always have long, thin antenna. Beetles will have all kinds of things. Remember to use them because yeah, use these features in conjunction with one each other because sometimes some beetles have slightly larger scutellum, so they have a slightly larger triangle. So use the antenna as well, just to make sure that you're on the right path. Your main groups of bugs are shield bugs, squash bugs, and plant bugs. Shield bugs tend to be shield shaped. They tend to be a bit more stocky. Your squash bugs are very dumpy. They've got junk in the trunk. You'll find these on things like dock. The dock bug, which is this one, is very common. And then you've got plant bugs, which tend to be quite dainty, quite oval. They can be a bit squat, but they're quite oval in shape, and they're quite prettily patterned in most cases as well. So they're probably the three you're gonna get the most. You'll also get ground bugs, but unless you're looking on the ground, you're not going to find those. There are so many more, as we've already spoken about. Go on to britishbugs.org.uk. They've got a photo gallery, and it's not just the adults, it's the babies without the wings as well. They can be really easy to ID. So if you found some, snap some pictures and go on British Bugs, and you'll probably find the answer you want, which is fantastic. It's a great resource. Aphids are overlooked. They are part of the same group. Some have shark fins, so this is the willow aphid, massive thing, has a big shark fin on its back. They clone and they have two modes. So they have I'm feeding and reproducing mode where they don't have any wings and they just clone and clone and clone. And when they run out of food or it gets a bit crowded, they start to produce offspring that have wings that could take off and repopulate new areas. So they basically transform into different modes depending on what's happening. So they're really cool, and they always get knocked in, and everyone overlooks them. They clone. Some of them have shark fins, and they can transform into two different modes. What's not to like, right? Fantastic. Your ones to pick out. This is your forest shield bug. It can be a bit bronzy sometimes, but this dark color and this little tip on the point with this stripe is very addictive. Quite a large one. You've got your birch shield bug. Find it on birch. Quite pretty. Looks a bit like the hawthorn shield bug, but you find them in different places. And you've got the green shield bug, which is the big green one. Easy, done. Three species. Bosh. Okay, that's kind of me done. So I just wanted to talk about resources really quickly, and we're throwing some questions. I know I'm overrunning a bit, sorry, but we'll get there. So there are loads and loads of fold-out guides. So there's one on distinctive terrestrial beetles that's just come out. It's like £4. What's not to like? We've got the ladybird one. I love this ladybird guide. It's really good because it's got all the distinctive ones, some of the color forms. It's great, and you can see them all at once, which is fantastic. You can also do the ladybird larvae as well, so there's another fold out for that. So you can look at the babies, and when you're finding these weird grub things, you can ID them as well. And there's one that kind of covers a bit of everything. So it's good to have if you're working with school groups and stuff like that. Less in depth, I would say, but very good to like when you start to group stuff. This is by Brock. This is the Comprehensive Guide to Insects of Britain and Ireland. It is my go-to field guide. I actually have the first edition, not this one. It is, I think my daughter's actually taken it today to go on a bug hunt. But it is my most used thing, and the author's fantastic as well. I've actually had lunch with him. It's just amazing. It's got so much in it. It's got a bit of everything. And it is only insects, so be aware of that. So no worms or crustaceans or anything like that. But it is absolutely amazing. This is a brand new one done by the same publisher. I bought this the other week because I was just getting sick. This is how many flies there are, and it's absolutely gorgeous. Recommend that as like about 30 quid. And considering there are so many flies, it's a good one to have. But the just for reference, the insect one is probably similar thickness, and it's got a bit of everything in, including some flies. Really, really nice guides. And then if you want to do ladybirds, this is my go-to. There are a few ladybird guides. This is lovely. You've got the fold out, which is fantastic. But if you want a bit more, because this has got the weird little ones that you would sometimes overlook as well as the big ones. But it's got a bit of everything in it. It's just, yeah, it's great. And there's some quite nice pages where they're all on the same page. So you can, I can't find one now. Of course, I can't find one. There's one. There's the little ones, but yeah, they've got like one like that for the bigger ones. So really, really good resource. Recommend that, and it goes in your bag. And I use it all the time because I can never remember their names, quite frankly, because I'm very forgetful as an entomologist. There are loads of free online resources. There's British Bugs. There's part of the photo gallery. There's UK Beetle Recording, which has an overview of the beetle families, which will get you somewhere, and it's all visual. And that is my slides done. Sorry for overrunning, guys, but there we are.